Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News. So we appreciate you giving us your time.
Regarding this matter,
what would you say that the move by Biden and his administration to ban oil imports from Russia will have the, I'll say, desired impact on Russia? Or could this be really more like cutting the nose to spite the face?
Well, basically, there is a little bit of a challenge here. On the one side, the United States of America is one of the largest oil consumers in the world. And obviously, well, Russia provides about 7% of the total world production of oil. So in a sense, we will see an impact on prices, and this is obviously going to impact on the United States, especially in terms of inflationary pressure, and that's going to obviously impact cost of doing business, and it's going to affect households in America too.
Yeah, and I mean, just speaking on that, I mean, what do you see being the long-term implications of these sanctions? You know, you're talking a bit about on the US, but in general, I mean, this is a worldwide impact, wouldn't it? It would obviously then trickle down to all of us, and I just wonder if you know, you're seeing this becoming quite a messy situation at the end of it. I mean, what are some of the long-term impacts that we can expect? And maybe I'm being selfish, but maybe we can talk about what would happen here, what would happen on the African continent, what would happen, you know, in South Africa.
Yes, yeah, the impacts are going to be felt in South Africa, especially seen. I mean, South Africa is one of the top 20 or at least top 30 countries in the world that of oil production. We use about 0.7% of the total, shall we say, of the demand or the production of oil. And so in terms of South Africa, as we don't really have a very large refinery sector, we do know that one of our largest refineries is planning to close down towards the end of March. But we are definitely going to see an increase in terms of prices. There's a global rally in the moment in terms of markets. Many of the markets are right now fear-driven. The price increases are going to be quite shall we say, it's going to have quite an effect, especially in places such as the European Union. There's this huge global demand for energy, and the shuffling around for new suppliers is very, very big. New relationships in terms of political relationships are forming, as we could see, between United States and Venezuela. Venezuela being obviously one of the world's largest oil producers taking place, well, currently. And so we also seen, so we say, marginal increase in supply by many of the OPEC states. But all of this is going to translate into one big thing, and that is inflation around the world. And this kind of inflationary pressure, especially in from European standards and American side, is going to affect South Africa in a big way. As much of our goods that we import, obviously, we're going to be importing that inflation with us. With the rising oil prices in South Africa, much of it being consumed in the petrochemical industry, obviously road and construction, and of course household consumption industry, we are actually going to be quite constrained by what is actually happening. This is going to affect households in a big way. We're looking at changing distribution of household income, where how income is going to be distributed within households. And in the short term, that's going to have an impact.
Prof, you know, if you take a look at everything that's unfolding, are you seeing that or getting some sort of idea that Putin might have thought about this for a very, very long time? You know, these sanctions were, of course, supposed to only impact Russia the most, but it seems to be doing much more damage than that. I mean, if you look at the companies that are now having to pull out of Russia, for example, I mean, Russia is one huge country. So it's those companies at the end of the day that are going to be losing millions, perhaps billions. And also just looking at the fact that you talk about partnerships, Venezuela, China also becoming a sort of buffer for Russia. The issue with the Visa and MasterCard, it seemed that, you know, Putin had something else in mind. Is there an idea that this was long thought of? You know, it seems that there were plans already in place should sanctions be imposed. One wonders what the thinking was, you know, from Putin and indeed his government.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of information channeling happening in the moment where information flows may be blocked or even disrupted to a large degree. And this is actually going around the world. There are many, many different, shall we say, versions of facts that are actually rolling out. But in terms of business, the facts are translated into the markets. We can see the markets taking strain. We can see huge market volatility taking place around the world. Businesses are going to be impacted. Everybody involved or everybody affected by the sanctions are going to be losers, both on the Russian sides and countries outside. South Africa alone stands to lose a large amount in terms of lost investment from this, and this is going to obviously translate back at home in terms of the impact on job creation, output production, and of course unemployment. So yes, around the world we are definitely seeing it. European Union is of course scuffling right now to find alternative energy suppliers, and they are, I believe, very, very much concerned about this. I think in terms of the translation to business and how it's going to affect us is quite noteworthy. I think that the question you asked earlier about, did Putin take this into consideration? I think sanctions is definitely something they would have put on the cards, but the level and extent of the sanctions, I don't believe were quite there. We've seen sanctions in the past. We've seen sanctions, partial sanctions, especially in terms of favorable trade products being sanctioned. But I think an all-out sanction impacting even the banking sector, the rapid weakening of the Russian currency, all of those are playing very, very significant impacts right now. And that's going to obviously affect both the Russian people and, of course, but the relationships and the ties, the new political shuffling that we've seen right now is also very interesting, and that's going to have a long-term effects.
I mean, we spoke about the possible long-term effects, not just for Russia and the US, but certainly globally. And, I wonder at this time in terms of, how far this can go. How long can these sanctions be imposed? And it doesn't seem as though Putin, Russia will sit in a corner and cry, and they will fight back. And they've certainly shown that they will do so, and make things difficult for all those who are punishing Russia. How long can that be sustainable in reality?
Well, no. That's actually a really interesting approach, because I believe right now that the moment sanctions were imposed, and at the current point in time, many of the institutions, both within Russia, and the Ukraine especially, are being very much damaged. And the Russian institutions are going to take be it both in Ukraine and Russia, but those institutions are going to take a long time to repair. It's going to take many years for faith and confidence within Russia to start to be reestablished. So even if we were to end sanctions immediately, the long-term effects are going to be well noticed and definitely felt both within Russia and within other countries. There's a lot of money that has been lost. The markets are losing on this, and it's again, we're really seriously looking at these kind of repercussions are going to have very long-term effects, irrespective of the actions that we're going to be going further from here.
All right, Prof, it's always a pleasure, and thanks so much for giving us your input on the show. We certainly do appreciate it.